As you'll see in this video, the British Crown is actually acting like Gomer of Gog and Magog in the current hyperstition event that they have created. You'll see what I mean. They've created a false reality. It's really quite amazing. Machiavelli has really done an incredible job, or did an incredible job. So this is the definition of hyperstition. I showed you in a previous video that the current royal family called Windsor, they're actually an ancient German ruling bloodline. In Germany, we know, as I showed in the last video, and I'll show you briefly again in this video, true blood Germans are of Gomer, and I'll show you why that's important in a couple seconds. But a hyperstition is basically how a cultural belief, a work of fiction like the Bible, makes itself real, as in the invasion of the Holy Land during the Crusades. That was Gomer, Japheth, invading from the north in the land of the Shemites, just like it says in Ezekiel 38. These Gomerites have been running an Ezekiel 38 deal for a long time. Now, not surprisingly, back when this whole thing got started, I mean, most of Europe was illiterate, and the king back then, his first book, King James, was a book about demonology, and he encouraged witch hunting. So the Salem witch hunts, thanks, King James. So you have to realize that we are living in this Gomerized, world for many, many, many years. And it became really obvious to me in the context of religion, well, in recent years, but nothing was more obvious than old Ted Cruz when he was speaking for Gomer without knowing it. So here's a P.F. Young dude doing a thing with Gnostic Informant. Ted Cruz, in this video, does not know that Genesis 12:3 is the verse he lives his life by. And he tells Tucker Carlson that I grew up in Sunday school. I was taught from the Bible that those who bless Israel will be blessed, and those who curse Israel will be cursed. I'm on the blessing side of these things. Well, and he said the Bible says the nation of Israel, but it doesn't say that. Genesis 12:3 was stated before Abraham had Isaac, or certainly before Isaac had Jacob, who was to be called Israel. So there is no nation being mentioned here. And in Numbers, where it's mentioned again, that's also fallacious, because in that verse in Numbers, the sorcerer Balaam is the one who's being spoken to. And Balaam was later killed in the fairy tale. I mean, what these poor creatures believe. So this is what we were told in Genesis 12:3. I will bless those who bless you. So that is a dude, Abram, not the nation of Israel, as this Gomerite spokesperson is telling people. It's an embarrassment, the highest seats of the land. And he does it. You should watch this video. You can see the title of this video, The Christian Death Cult That's Running the United States. That's not terribly off the mark, but really we should look at it as Gomerites, right? Because if we go World War II, we can get a much clearer view. After that, you got the fog of war, the mud of all the stuff with Hitler and all the rest of it. Much better to look at this before World War II. Much easier. Now, with that in mind, the British government did not try to hyperstitious the Bhagavad Gita or the Astavakra Samhita, or also called the Astavakra Gita. So they didn't try. They obviously conquered the British subcontinent and caused all his troubles, or most of the trouble that it's having today. Wherever these Gomerites go, it's like a tsunami of hell is left afterwards for years to fix up as they go in there. They're kind of like that. I forget that movie was where in a space movie where this horrible group goes from planet to planet, just devouring them. Not like the Borg, kind of Borg-like almost. Anyway, you could not superstitious Krishna. It doesn't work. The Bible is I should say hyperstitious. The Bible is the best book to make superstitious and hyperstitious. because of all the war that goes on. Now, my take is that the British House didn't really know who they were in the Bible, because why would they actually be the enemy of God? That's the role they're taking. But the Bible was appealing to the British Crown, because wherever the British Crown went and brought the faith with the colonizers, they used it as justification for their extermination of adherents of other faiths, enslavement of those natives, and exploitation of land and seas, which we all obviously know very, very well from British history, because the sun never sets on the empire. And think about that. The sun never sets on the empire. And we were told in the Talmud, presumably from back around 1400, whatever, I don't know when. We were told in the Talmud, as you'll see shortly, that Gomer will move forward and conquer the world. So here is Gomer. Here is Gomer swooping in from the north, and Gomer is the enemy of the God of the Bible. Gomer is the enemy of the God of the Bible, and the King James Bible is a creation of Gomer. You got to let that sit in and like wrap your head around how insane that whole thing actually is. It's truly amazing. It's truly amazing. So stop blaming one religion versus the other in the actual, true blaming sense, and realize that it is Gomer that has delivered both of these religions that have created such problems for the world. So here's what we're told in the Talmud. Germans would Gomer, Germania, Germany. Gomer would go forth, they would destroy the entire world, and they did. And here it is. And their last stop, the last place they took over was Palestine. That was called Palestine from 500 BC to 1948. Extremely easy to identify. Herodotus tells us that in his book Histories. Histories. Okay, so the steps by which current Gomer House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha took over the land of the Shemites, which is what Palestine is. Here are the steps. I'm not going to go through these now. You can go through them. You can see 1915 is when 1915 is when the deal was being struck with the Shemites and the Japhethites, the Gomerites. And then Sykes-Picot is how they were swindled. Gomerites swindled the Shemites in 1916 with the Sykes-Picot deal, and on down the line you can read through and see how Gomer did what they did. Now the interesting thing is, when you see Jerusalem being surrounded by armies, you will know that its desolation is near. Jerusalem will be trampled on by the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. Well, the Gomerites are the Gentiles that have been trampling this land since the year 1000. These are the Crusades, right? Coming in, right? They came in from Middle Europe, right? And even Britain to invade the land of the Shemites. That's what's been going on forever and ever, it seems. Now, the problem of dealing with this is that people will often think it's just like some religious thing. We have to realize that Gomer is very powerful. The British Crown, basically, and the Gomerite system that controls the world. Because it's invoked upon us, right? The Bible has been invoked upon us by many heads of state, obviously. So how should we look at this? Well, this would be a normal functioning brain. Now, this is a brain that is functionally damaged, right? So think about it. Functionally damaged voters with Stockholm Syndrome believe their vote counts. This is the brain that I've been showing you in terms of what happens to the Christian brain, right? Before a Christian prayer, scapegoating prayer, after the prayer, and you're brain dead. If they live brain dead, it's kind of over. So how would we apply this when it comes to voting, right? So think about this. Right now, there's a big problem in America. Now, the thing is, now I'm going to go back to 2016 just because I couldn't find two funnier pictures. I mean, do you actually think that either one of these characters is going to fix anything or could. Oh my God. It's impossible. Now, if we step back for a moment and look at how debt expansion works. So it took until so basically 200 years to get to 1 trillion in debt in America. And then in 4 years, Reagan added another trillion in just 4 years. 4 years. 4 years took 200 years to get to 1 trillion, and just 4 years to do another trillion, and then another 4 years to get to 3 trillion. So Reagan, the great conservative, tripled the national debt more than any previous president, save for, Roosevelt during World War II. And then brain-dead Democrats think that there was a budget surplus because the word budget surplus is there. If you were 4 million in debt, and eight years later you were 5.5 trillion in debt, but had 2 trillion in the bank, would you have a surplus? That's their claim, basically. There's no surplus. For there to be a surplus, you'd have to. They're calling it a budget surplus. They're just using Machiavellian language to just, capture the weak minds of believing Democrats versus the weak minds of believing Republicans. It's just how it goes. Both require the same level of brain deadedness. And you can see how debt expansion has gone. So it'd be much better to step back and realize that you're watching Gomer do Gomer's thing. And all you're doing is voting for Gomer. And that's why no one ever is happy after every 2 to 4 years, really every 4 years, right? It always gets seemingly worse or doesn't change the way we were told it would change. Because that's not how Gomer operates. And Gomer has been operating for a very, very, very long time. This is King Charles' coat of arms. And this is the previous house, the House of Wettin. You can see before 1000 AD. It's unbelievable. And the Oldenburg is the other side of his family that goes back to, I think, almost 800s. Back to the 700, 800 Saxony days. You can see here, House of Wettin, who ruled territories in present-day Germany of Saxony, Thuringia. Well, Saxony, so you can think goes back. Oldest dynasties in Europe. I thought I was going to say Saxony, the actual location. Oldest dynasties in Europe, as is the Oldenburg, which was his father's side was Oldenburg. I think it was Oldenburg. No, his grandfather's side was Oldenburg. Anyway, the longest is pure Gomer. Gomer rules the world. Gomer's main ally is America in their rule of the world via the Bible. You have to understand, this is very important to understand. The Bible tells us that the entire global population came from 3 friggin' dudes. Japheth, Shem, and Ham. Japheth is the progenitor of all Europeans, starting with the Turks. Shem, all Middle Easterners. Ham, all Africans. Everybody else, not sure. It's all made up anyway. However, in the made-up story, the true Shemites are Arabs, Iraqis, Syrians, Palestinians, and the Yemenis. Yemeni? Now, Yemen, of course, goes right to about here, roughly. So you got a bunch of Shem in there. So you could be Ham. Now, Ham is not playing any role currently. In fact, if you're over in Libya, Ham got the shit bombed out of him by the Japhethites. Yeah, Japheth just takes out everybody. And Japheth does it under the cloud of fog based upon embracing the Bible. Isn't that interesting? Japheth is from the north, and Japheth bombs everybody in the Middle East. And so it's been going on for years, as have the invasions from the north, from the Crusades back from the year basically, 1090 when the first one was. So we know that there's this incredible partnership between these two powerful Gomerite families, and they talk about it. There's Georgie Boy talking about it with this dude, and you got our current guys, and they all say the same thing. So Japheth Gomer is the U.S. and U.K. That's what they are. The U.S. and U.K. are from Europe. They are Japheth Gomer. They share a special relationship. Now, when you drop bombs on Syria, Iraq, and Yemen, you're dropping bombs on Shem. Shem is the lineage of Jesus, you morons. Shem is a lineage. There is no Sem. Sem is, I'll show you. Shem is the lineage of Jesus, because you only have Japhethites, Shemites, Hamites. Hamites are out of the picture, except when they pipe in and say, like Omar Ilhan says, hey, Jesus was a Palestinian Jew. He was. He was a Shemite Palestinian Jew. Palestine was called Palestine from 500 BC, according to Herodotus. So, in 2016, the United States dropped 24,000 bombs on the Shemites. Gomerite USA dropping 24,000 bombs on the Shemites in 2016. And then Trump's first office, similar amount of bombs dropped. So Obama, the Democrat, dropped 24,000 bombs on the Shemites. And so did Trump in the following year. So you can see how this is going. It's the Gomerite world domination. If you pull back and look at it that way, as opposed to the stupid way most people view it, in terms of current religious affiliations and misinterpretations of the Bible. What a bunch of friggin' idiots. You can see how we're destroyed now, right, by these psychos? What's coming next? Well, this is just showing us who's who in the playing field. Here is Noah. After the flood, everyone was killed. Remember the first thing that Noah did after he landed in Genesis 8? He built an altar, got the fire going, killed some animals, burnt the flesh, and the God couldn't just love the smell of burnt flesh. Isn't it amazing? The destroying nations of the world, the destroying family of the world, the Bible lineage of the world, it's God that it promotes, loves the smell of burnt flesh. So here are the Gentiles, League of Nations, Gentiles. You can see Noah. Now Cush is not playing a big deal. That's Africa. Gog, who knows? Gomer's the big player. Now you can see 1800 was when the word Semite was invented. Prior to that, the name was always Shem. Shemite is the proper name. Shemite, not Semite. Shem is Hebrew, or Aramaic, whatever it is. Sem is the Greek translation of the word Shem. So to call yourself a Semite, you're invoking Greek language to call yourself a Hebrew. Isn't that interesting? Shemite is the right word. Who are the Shemites? Here they are. Modern Shemites are the Palestinians, Syrians, Iraqis, Yemenis, and all Arabs living over there in the land of Shem that I just showed you. That was given to us by the Bible. So now what else are we told? We are told this is Ezekiel 38, Meshach and Tubal. Meshach and Tubal right there. Gog, Magog, Gog, Magog. I already took out Cush. Here's Cush. Put is also, this is Cush and Ethiopia, Persia. Well, they're not playing any role here at all in the current domination. They're blaming Persia, like Persia's, what's Iran done except be attacked? Oh my God. And then Gomer with all its troops. And man, does Gomer have fucking troops. Gomer. You should watch, there's a Dave, I didn't put in here, I just kind of thought of it. Dave Chappelle doing Black Bush when he's questioned about the coalition. We got the coalition of the willing. Like who? He goes, well, they're going to send, PlayStations from China to help out. Sorry for going off. I didn't plan on talking about Chappelle, but look at Black Bush. And just think about Black Bush. We got a coalition of the willing. Well, the real coalition has been devastating for 1,000 years now of Gomer and the Gentiles irritating the Shemites. Isn't it interesting how that works? Here are the Shemites that are commonly attacked by the modern Gomerites of Europe and America. Because that's just how it is. You have only three families, only three sons of Noah have populated the earth. America and Europe is Japheth. Gomer being the biggie. So there's no way around this one. Good luck scapegoating yourself out of this one, Christians, if you get this far. And here's the passport to prove it. The Gomerite passport over those living in the land of the Shemites. Isn't that amazing? And of course, we bombed the shit out of you, as I just showed you before. So it was after Gomer created World War I that passports became mandatory. Isn't that incredible? Isn't that incredible how Gomer has Now you can't go anywhere. Facial recognition, blah, all that stuff, thanks to Gomer. And don't blame any specific religions, you morons. It's Gomer. Gomer did all of this. Gomer started their initiation of their world domination, just as outlined by Aldous Huxley and what's his face, Brave New World guy, not the other guy, Orwell. Both those guys wrote their books in like 1930-ish, 1930. So they could tell what was going on. World domination by Gomer began then. So stop blaming religions. They're not doing anything. They're just well, really, Christianity is the military and religious might of Gomer. It's so obvious, so obvious. So this is mandatory Palestine. Mandatory what? Well, this was what? Mandatory Palestine passports were issued by who? Gomer. The Gomer authorities gave passports to the Shemites living in Palestine at that point. And here it is. This is what they gave them. The British Gomerite Mandatory Palestine was a British Gomerite geopolitical entity that existed between 1920 and 1948 in the region of Shemite Palestine. Remember? You got Gomer, you got Japhethite, Gomerite, Shemite, and Hamites. That's it. That's all you got. And this is the Gomerite invasion. They've been doing it for 1,000 years, and Christians continue to cheer for it. What a bunch of morons. My God. So you can see under the League, so this all happened under the League of Japheth Nations mandate for Shemite Palestine. Oh, man, can you see the trouble? So, there they go. Whoop, British Palestine. Now, it should say this. All right, that's what it should be, because that's what it actually is. So you can see that this video's title is really accurate, right? Because if there's only Japhethite, Gomerites, Shemites, and Hamites aren't in the playing field right now, you can see that is Gomer that has been doing Gog and Magog for 1,000 friggin' years. And then the best thing happens. The best thing happens. King Charles does his first portrait. Now, if you look at who's going to take out the Gomerites and Gog and Magog is destroyed finally in Revelation 20, I guess it is. Right? Gog and Magog comes out of the pit again to capture all the nations of the world, and then God destroys them all. Well, the pit is where hell is, right? And it's called Hades, mostly, in the Bible, as I did a previous video on. Well, King Charles' first portrait happened to turn out like this. Why would the king of the Gomerites come in like the Dark Lord? I mean, it's just so incredible how this worked out. So let's look at the steps, how this works. Here you got the king of the Gomerites, Charlie. There's their coat of arms, their Gomerite coat of arms, right? And down over here you can see Shemite Palestine. Gomerite British Royal Military arrived in 1917. Part of Sykes-Picot. Sykes-Picot, after they lied to the Shemites, as I showed you briefly in the very beginning of this video. So everything I've shown you here is all right out of the historical literature and the Bible directly. None of this is Seaman's opinion. You might take it that way if it differs from what you think, but you can clearly see I didn't make any of this shit up. This is like the most incredible movie ever. So there's the passport that was instituted starting, 1920 or so? 1920 is when it started. So now we can see that Charles, the current king of the Gomerites, dressed like the Dark Lord, painted as the Dark Lord, is, now think about the issues that this part of the world is suffering from right now. It's like it's almost the time when the time of the Gentiles is going to end. Because in the Bible, the God of the Bible is the enemy of Gomer. And Gomer has been controlling the Middle East for 1,000 years. 1,000 years. But most specifically, the last 100 years. So the problem is, of course, is that brain-dead Gomerite Christianity is the religious and military arm of Gomer, who is with Gog and Magog and the enemy of Jesus. So watch the movie Praying for Armageddon and realize that all those praying for Armageddon are the enemy of Jesus according to the Bible that they believe is a true story. Oh, man. And, near-death experiencers, you really experience that which you deeply, deeply believe. So I'd be really careful about believing all this bullshit as being real and pull back on this thing. There's time for a serious pullback, as Jesus predicted in Luke. So you have to realize that Christians don't worship God or Jesus. Do you remember from one of the first, I think, Superman movies from way back when General Zod showed up. And the President of the United States bows down and he goes, "Oh, God." And General Zod goes, "Zod." Remember that? Well, Christians don't worship God. They worship Gog and Gomer without knowing it. Isn't that incredible? They worship and support Gog and Magog as Gomerites and don't know it. What a disaster. So let's go way back to mandatory Palestine. I want to show you here what the map looked like when mandatory Palestine kind of kicked in. So it looks, you can see what's there. So I will show you now. We're going to go back to 1135. You can see down in here, this was all called Jerusalem. Down in the Kingdom of Jerusalem is what was being done during the Crusades. Now we go back to Herodotus. Whoops, sorry. We go back to Herodotus, and you can see this whole area. It's called Palestine, Syria, right? And they had Egypt down below, and presumably Anatolia up above. So you can see 450 BC, 1135 BC, and then 1946. That's how it played out. Now, from 1515 until 1917, we are told, so from 1517 until 1917. So there was the longest period of peace ever experienced in Palestine was during the Ottoman Japhethite Turk rule that ended in 1917 when the Shemites fought the Japhethite Turks to take back their land, and then it was stolen by the Gomerite Brits. So you can see what we're told here. Palestine, which yearns for the peace and stability for over a century, since the current Gog and Magog started, saw its longest period during the Japhethite rule from 1516 until 1917, when the Gomerite mandate took in. Now, this is really interesting, too. This is from Ezekiel 38 as well, 14:16. Therefore, son of man, prophesy and say to Gog, who is Gomer, when my people are living in safety, will you not take notice of it? So they lived in safety for 400 years. Now, this is all hyperstitious. I'm just quoting the Bible just to show you how it fits into the hyperstitious situation that we're all living in. So will you not take notice that my people in Palestine are living in peace? You will come from your place in the far north, you with many nations with you. You will advance against my people like a cloud that covers the land. In days to come, go up, blah, blah. And anyway, so now you know the story. So we can see how it is that, well, 100 years after the Gentile Gomerites invaded Shemite land as predicted in Ezekiel 38 and by Jesus in Luke 21, right? 400 years, peace. 100 years after the Gomerites rolled in, this is the outcome. This is incredible. This is the Gomerite desolation of Shemite lands. Gomerite. Don't be weird with your stupid religious bullshit. This is Gomerite. Play by the Bible playbook that they are playing by. Pull back and look at it from that perspective and save yourself the stupidity of going elsewhere. Because look, the greatest buddies are the UK and the Brits, and together they have bombed the shit out of the Shemites according to the book that they embrace and own the copyright of. What a nightmare. Here's Jesus in Luke 21. When you see Jerusalem being surrounded by armies, you will know that its desolation is near. Flee to the mountains. Jerusalem will be trampled on by the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. Well, for the past 1,000 years, Palestine has been trampled upon by the Gomerite Gentiles of Europe. Plain as day, easy to see. And let's see how it played out currently. The current desolation is the work of Gomer, of Gog and Magog, as you will see. In fact, what's written here actually happened. Now, do you remember any time in your life when Jerusalem was even remotely guarded by a foreign military? And of course, the answer is no. You don't remember until 2018. A warship with Marines loitered for a month on alert in the Red Sea during the U.S. Embassy move to Jerusalem. So, Gomer moved itself into Jerusalem. Gomer moved itself into Jerusalem. Tear gas is being fired at protesters. Who's protesting? Shemites are protesting from the dropping of Gomerite tear gas. That's what happened. So, a warship with Marines, Gomerite warship, was, and here are the Shemites being tear gassed. Isn't that incredible? We're watching it live. We're watching Luke 21 happen live. And we're even told by Reuters, view from U.S. military and flight shows Gaza, desolation. The desolation of Jerusalem, greater Jerusalem, just as Jesus said. Isn't that scary? That should really, really, really scare people. And it should cause you to realize who the big players are right now. Gomer, it could only be Gomer. Where does the weaponry come to take out the Shemites in Gaza? From Europe and America, which means Europe and America are the agents of Gomer. Do you remember Trump's video he sent out? Trump, Gaza, shining bright. Dun, dun, dun. And then he and Netanyahu are hanging out on the beach. Here they are, the agents of Gomer. There they are, the agents of Gomer. And of course, we're going to put a true abomination, according to the Shemites, in the middle of Gaza. And there you go. Now, it turns out that Trump, his father, is pure German. Both of Trump's father's parents, his grandparents on his father's side, are from Bavaria. And his mother, when she married his father, she was a British Gomerite citizen. So these guys are basically agents of Gomer. And if this guy is actually a true Shemite, right? Well, he's a traitor to the true Shemites. Either he is a imposter Shemite, or he is a traitor to the true Shemites. Because we know what happened. We know that the Gomerites have invaded the land of the Shemites. It's very, very, very obvious. Here again are the steps. You can read through yourself if you wish, step by step. And the final, so 750,000 Shemites were removed in 1948, and then 2 million have been removed during the current desolation by Gomer. Tough deal to deal with, but you can see that the title of this video, 100% true. The British crown is actually Gomer of Gog and Magog. So you Christians might want to rethink what you're doing to yourselves and the world.